What is up, y'all? Welcome back to another video. In this video, we're going to be looking at the San Francisco 49ers and how they went worst to first in their division and actually a Super Bowl in one offseason, and how we could potentially follow their blueprint and do the same thing. So let's get it started. That's right. So you're probably clicking on this video, you looked at the thumbnail, you looked at the title, and you said, no, I ain't going to do it. I don't think we're going to do it. So you know what? Forget this video. But you still clicked on it because you're a real one. And hey, you know what? If you don't believe this, you're not this optimistic, that's cool. I'm glad you're here. If you're this optimistic, awesome, because you're going to like this video. So I'm again once looking at the 49ers. And the 49ers are just perfect to look at because they're very similar to us. We talked about a lot of similarities between Matt Patricia and Kyle Shanahan. And I know not everybody wants to believe it. And honestly, I can completely understand why you don't. However, I think this is the perfect team to look at, though, to see what they did during their offseason and how they became such a great team just that fast, and how we could potentially try to use that same blueprint, because we always talk about, we might be the next Patriots, maybe we're the next San Francisco 49ers, or maybe we're the next Detroit Lions, but I don't know. Maybe we should follow the 49ers blueprint instead of the Patriots, and that may be what the Detroit Lions are doing. So I'm taking a look at their offseason after their 4-win season. As all of us know by now, they had 4 wins, and then they were last in division, and the very next season they're in the Super Bowl. Us, we just had 3 wins, we were last in division, and we're hoping that maybe next year, 2020, we will be in the Super Bowl. So we're going to be looking at their offseason, what everybody was saying their needs were, how they addressed those needs, and that took them to the place that they were about a month ago. I don't know. So let's get it started. The 49ers in 2018 finished with only 4 wins on the season, and they were very bad. Jimmy Garoppolo went down with an injury very early in the season, week 3. He went down with an injury, and the 49ers from there on out just really couldn't get anything going. I mean, there was a lot of hype going this season. I saw they were actually projecting that they could actually win the NFC West that season. However, it just didn't go that way. And I know a lot of people had a lot of hype about this season. I had a lot of hype about this season. And once again, here's another similarity. Let me just throw it out there. Jimmy Garoppolo gets hurt. Their starting quarterback. Matthew Stafford gets hurt. Our starting quarterback. Now it happened a little bit later for us. But still, starting quarterback goes down at some point. Not late in the season. Ours was like the middle of the season. Theirs was a little bit earlier in the season. So both starting quarterbacks did go down, though. So I thought I would point that out just because, it's worth noting. But really the problem is with the Detroit Lions this offseason is the defense. We know that the offense was really good. With Matthew Stafford, they were just insanely good. And without Matthew Stafford, they actually played a few games where they could have won without him. I mean, we've seen games where they split like 4 touchdowns and they lost, but because the defense just couldn't get a stop with a backup quarterback. So the offense definitely had their moments without him, and they were great with him. And that was kind of a similar thing with the San Francisco 49ers. Actually, their offense wasn't that bad, even without Jimmy Garoppolo. The problem was defensively, they just couldn't seem to stop anybody, which is weird because in this last season, in the last NFL season where the San Francisco 49ers were really, really good, their defense was really, really good. And that's what everybody knew. Like, that San Fran defense is a problem. And we thought the Lions defense was going to be like that this year, but obviously we know a lot of things went wrong. Damon Harrison's production went down. Mike Daniels barely played because of an injury. Defensive line was just completely injured. Everybody was hurt. We didn't perform. Everybody was underwhelming. It was a bad season for the Detroit Lions, even though we had such an optimistic offseason that made us think that our defense was going to be one of the best in the league. I mean, you go from 10th in the league, you add pieces, and you turn it to the worst defense in the league. How is that possible? Well, that's pretty much what happened with us. And I decided to look at the San Francisco 49ers, and it came to my surprise that this was like the same thing that happened to the San Francisco 49ers. They were so bad defensively, and their offense wasn't that bad, and then in one offseason, they switched it around just like that. I decided to look at their defense and see really what was that bad. Well, like they said, they struggled pretty much across the board defensively, which we did as well. We couldn't stop the run. We couldn't stop the pass, though, at all. We were the worst passing defense in the league. Well, when the San Francisco 49ers were really bad and they only won 4 games, they were the 27th worst passing defense when it came to efficiency. So they were very bad, just like us. They just could not stop the passing. And not only could they not stop passing, well, they didn't get any pressure either. They weren't able to find anybody that could consistently get pressure outside of one player on that defensive line. So one player on the defensive line was getting pressure, but there was no one else to help DeForest Buckner out. He was the only guy that was getting any kind of pressure. Well, if you look at the Lions last season, that's kind of Trey Flowers. Now, he did have Devon Kennard to help him out a little bit, but, those 2 guys and really no one else did anything. Like I said, we were expecting Mike Daniels, Damon Harrison, Austin Brown, all of these guys to do something. No one really had an impact outside of those guys. That's why I said interior defensive line needs upgraded, because that's like our weakest point of our defense. But still, that was something something that was a big problem for the San Francisco 49ers. They had one guy that could get pressure, but then after that, they didn't have another guy that totaled over 5.5 sacks on that team. So you could definitely see that was a big problem. Like I said, secondary was a big problem. Coming into their 2019 offseason, they said that one of their biggest needs was edge rusher, because everybody needs an edge rusher, and they just need to find some way to get some help for Buckner and for that defense as a whole. They also needed depth across the board, which, again, is similar to us. Think about that. They needed depth across the board defensively. That's exactly what we need defensively. Across the board, we need depth, right? We need cornerback depth. We need safety depth. We need linebacker depth. We need some starting talent as edge rusher, defensive lineman, but we need depth as well. And that's what they need. They need depth, and they need guys that could get some pressure. And they weren't rated very high when it came after the offseason. So basically what happened is when the offseason took place, the draft and free agency, then the 49ers decided to rank their positions by stars, or 4 out of 5, right? So, for example, they would look at the wide receiver group, and they would say, oh, that's a really good group. That's 4 stars out of 5. So that's what I'm going to be telling you now, because this happened before the season actually started. So they were grading these positions based on what they did during the offseason. And I will go through those just to show you guys what our team looks like and what everybody is kind of worried about, and how this could be very similar to what our team looks like in 2020. Now, obviously, not everything's exactly the same, but you can see, how they weren't perfect, but yet they were still a great defense in 2019. So like I said, they didn't have a very good pass rush, right? So they added pass rushers. They went out and got Dee Ford. They went out and got Nick Bosa with the second pick in the draft. At number 3, we could get Chase Young. I'm just saying, wouldn't that be freaky? 2 Ohio State edge rushers, that would be pretty wild. Their secondary, they didn't really address it, right? They had Richard Sherman. They had some young guys. Richard Sherman was their most dependable older cornerback, but after that, they really didn't have a very dependable cornerback. They had some young guys that they were hoping would, rise to the occasion, I guess you could say. The safety group was really depleted. Not a lot of talent there. They said this could have been one of their worst positional groups as a team. They didn't have a lot of depth. They didn't have a lot of talent there at the safety spots, and that was definitely a problem. At the linebacker position, they weren't very good. However, they added Quan Alexander, but he was dealing with injuries. So they did make some moves, but you can see their main moves came in edge rusher, and they added a couple of pieces here and there. But after the offseason was finished, after they made all their moves and they rated each position, here's what the ratings came out to be. Okay, you ready for this? Listen to these. We're going to go defensively, and we'll hop back to the offensive side of things. So defensive line, they rated them a 4 out of 5 after that offseason. So after their 2018 offseason, heading into the 2019 season, they gave them a 4 out of 5 as a defensive line. Now remember, this was not a good defensive line. Like I said before, only one player, there was only one really good pass rusher on this team in Buckner, and after that, he didn't have a lot of help. But yet, they were rated 4 out of 5 stars. Why? Because they went out and got Nick Bosa, because they traded for a guy like Dee Ford, and they were able to get a lot more pressure. Linebacker core was then graded a 3 out of 5. Safety group, they gave them a 2 out of 5. This safety group was given a 2 out of 5. If you look at our safety group, I would say that's probably what I would give us as well. Okay, so overall, they weren't great. They had a lot of pressure, and the secondary, it wasn't very good. Their secondary was not rated very high. The safety group is the secondary group. So they gave them a 2 out of 5 as an entire secondary. 2 out of 5. So they didn't think highly of what they did during the offseason anyways of their secondary group. When we look at our secondary group, like Richard Sherman, we have our Darius Slay. After that, we have a lot of question marks, right? We have a lot of guys that we're hoping can improve. Okay, we're hoping some young guys can improve. We're hoping Amani can improve and possibly take over that spot. When you look at the safety position, we got a lot of young guys. Tracy Walker, Will Harris, both very young players that we're hoping can improve. Maybe we'll add a veteran to that. So again, they didn't think very highly of their secondary, yet they saw it really highly of that defensive line because they added so many pieces. When you look at our defensive line, we have Trey Flowers, Devon Kennard, and not a lot after that. But I'm assuming this offseason that's going to be a huge move for us to go try to upgrade this front seven. And you see, they gave their linebacker group a 3 out of 5, which in 2018 wasn't a very good group. So the front seven wasn't very good, but they upgraded that. They didn't really upgrade too much of the secondary. And that was something that's interesting to me because that's how I want us to do it. I want us to go inside out and work our way out like that. And I've always said interior defensive line, linebackers, on the offensive side of things, offensive line. And when you look at the 49ers offense, hopefully you guys are keeping up here. I know I'm going a little fast, but I'm trying to, kind of get everything out. When you look at the 49ers offense after the 2018 season, they had a lot of positive things to build on. That's why there was still a lot of hype around this team. We were not bad offensively without Matthew Stafford. We weren't the same offense, but we weren't bad. Yet they had a lot of pieces that they knew were going to be coming back. One of their main things was they had one of the best offensive lines. They didn't have a lot of great things as a team, but offensive line and now defensive line after the offseason is looking like two of their best positional groups. Again, something that I think we should do. Right tackle and left guard, I think we should try to upgrade both of those. And then the line and linebacker group. Those are everywhere I'm focusing. Everything else is a bonus. I'm focusing there first. And when you look at the 49ers, they had a really good offensive line heading in that season, and they were able to maintain and keep a good offensive line. And that's really what their main thing was offensively. Now, they did have a couple of pieces. They had George Kittle, who just came off a breakout year. TJ Hawkinson, breakout year in the second year. I don't know, maybe same school, Iowa. I mean, you might have to see it. We might have to see it. They had some young wide receivers like Pettis out there who were slowly improving. They had Marquise Godwin, who was really fast. The problem was he was dealing with a lot of injuries. They added Deebo Samuel. Our wide receiver group looks really good. I think our wide receiver group looks better than their group. They added Tevin Coleman to their running back group to go along with Matt Breida. We have Kerryon Johnson. We have Bo Scarborough. We have Ty Johnson. We could go add another running back later in the draft or in the free agency. We had very similar offenses. It was the defensive that I really wanted to focus on. And as you can see, that's what they decided to do in the offseason. They went from the inside and worked their way out. And I see just so many similarities of what we could do this offseason. When you compare us getting pressure to them getting pressure. We didn't get pressure last season. Everybody said, well, you can't give. Everybody says this. Everybody's argument against getting a cornerback at 3 is, well, you know, if he has all day, he's going to get open anyways. And that's how I agree. I think Okudah is a great talent. And you can still get Okudah if you get pressure. You have to get guys that can get pressure and stop the run. Those two things are a must. And those are two things that were definitely fixed here by the San Francisco 49ers in the offseason. The front seven was somewhere they focused pretty much all of their attention defensively. And, you know, they added a couple of pieces here at the safety, the cornerback, added some depth, right? They added some depth. But they didn't, you know, they really went in and they went off on the front seven. And that's where they tried to upgrade everything. And I think that's what we need to do this offseason. Look at our team. We need to go interior defensive line. That needs to be one of our main upgrades this offseason. We need an edge rusher. We need to add another edge rusher that can help us get some pressure. We need some linebacker depth, okay? And then everything after that, I think is just, you know, upgrade. When you look at the 49ers offense, what's so great? Well, they have a great offensive line. They have a very young offensive line that's very good. They had a new right tackle. I'm just saying, the similarities are there. And when you look at the 49ers did, now everything's not exactly the same. I think we should look at the same similar blueprint. Trench is out on each side. I'd say Trench is out. And now after looking at the 49ers and how they approached their offseason and went from worst to first, and how them fixing trenches made them one of the best pass coverage teams in the league. It wasn't that they went and got the best cornerbacks in the league. They still had these same cornerbacks. The difference was they were able to get pressure, and it made everybody else look a lot better than what you would have expected. And their secondary, just as a whole, looked a lot better. Offensively, they were already a good team. We were already good offensively last year. I don't want to mess any of that up. Let's just keep the chemistry rolling. We were balling last season. Let's not change too much of it. Upgrade the O-line and stick with that. Then you're good to go. You have your young tight end in TJ Hawkinson. You have a tight end in Jesse James, who you gave a lot of money to, who you're expecting to have make a lot of plays. So we don't need to revamp the offense other than the O-line. Get some help there on the edges or maybe a little bit on the interior. Because the interior for the Niners wasn't great. It was just solid. That's what we look like right now. We're solid. But we need to add a tackle. When you look at defense, front seven is where we need help. We also need help at the cornerback and the safety. And you can list out everything, but I just think we need depth there. We can add some depth, but focus on the front seven and it'll make everything else look better. You're not going to be perfect. Not every position is going to be the best. However, they did enough. And when you looked at their rankings, after the 49ers fans saw this and they said, okay, how do we think each position looks? Well, the secondary doesn't look very good, but we have a really good defensive line and a solid linebacker core. What turned out? Well, they have one of the best defenses in the league. Offensively, they were already a solid offense. Their offensive line was really good. That was their main thing. Their two highest graded positional groups coming after the offseason was offensive line and defensive line. What do we need to be our highest positional groups? Front seven and offensive line. I see a lot of similarities. I think that's a lot where the Lions are going to focus this offseason. So I wanted to just point that out and just kind of look at what they did heading into that season. Now, not everything works out the same way, right? I mean, teams can go about it different ways, but I still think that's the way to go about it. I'm not against adding a guy like Okudah as long as you get help in free agency, but that's my first priority. I'm getting interior defensive linemen. If I can't get that in free agency, I'm getting in the draft, okay? If I can get that in free agency, now that opens you up to go get a guy like Okudah. If you move on from Slate, then yeah, you're going to probably need to get Okudah. So it just kind of changes things, but I thought I would just point that out. Let me know your thoughts, comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'm out.